This week on the WriterCon podcast,
I wrote Jacob Fishman's Marriages during COVID, and Bill was good enough to decide to put out Road Comic again, the first book I wrote, and decided to go through it and make some changes, and wound up changing the entire book. About 7 lines left from that book to what eventually became The Joke Was on Me. So I could do COVID again. I mean, productivity-wise, it was great for me.
welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Rene Gutteridge, best-selling author of over 30 novels and screenplays.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich, and hello, writers. We have a very special episode planned because our super special guest is a longtime friend of the podcast, friend of WriterCon, and one of the funniest guys and best writers you'll ever meet. It's Barry Friedman. More on that later. On the last podcast, you may recall we kind of looked back at 2022. So I think this time we should venture into making predictions for 2023, which of course is a lot more challenging. Rene, my co-host, Rene Gutteridge, have you got a line on 2023 yet?
I am sure our listening audience is just going to make all kinds of bets to what I'm getting ready to predict. Okay.
Tell me where to shift the stock.
Exactly. So here's my prediction. Lots more legal woes in the publishing world. And
I bet that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's my other one. So I think that there may be a lot more authors inspired to go outside the box, sort of like Brandon Sanderson did, and, see if there's alternate ways to earn some extra income outside the traditional publishing way of pay, which we all agree is not always great.
Absolutely. Jesse, how about you? You've sat through and administrated and often chipped in on many of these conversations. You got any predictions?
Well, I'm going to go with my silliest one first, which would be a literary themed cryptocurrency like Shakespeare coin, or maybe even more depressingly, like a Patterson coin. Like someone's going to try one and it's going to be hilarious. I mean, I guess in actuality, that already happened in 2022 with the JRR token, which sadly was sued out of existence, much to my chagrin. But maybe one that sticks around, I should say.
Wow, that's should we run out and patent that or something? That's an awfully good idea.
Writer coin, like it's already there. We just put an I in there.
We're just one letter away.
I'm trademarking that, internet. Can't take it.
We
do it now.
Own it.
The writer coin. Yes. Oh gosh.
I'm gonna go to whatever the like name cheap of cryptocurrency names are and buy that name.
Is that how it's done?
I have no idea, but I'm gonna find out.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love that. Okay. Well,
definitely now we know a lot about what's coming up in the future of 2023. Our guest, as I think I mentioned, is Barry Friedman, top-tier professional stand-up comic, author of 6 books, and he's got a new one, the title of which I can't say on the podcast because then I'd have to check restricted distribution boxes, but we will discuss it in the interview, I promise. Barry is an essayist and reporter and political columnist. His work has appeared in, like I said, 6 books, and Esquire and The Progressive Populist, and a lot of other super cool places, including the AAPG, that's an oil and gas explorer magazine. We'll ask him about that too. But first, the news. All right, this is our special 2022 in review episode of the news segment where I've broken down some categories. Rene and Jesse have seen them in advance, so let's hear what you think. Okay, biggest authors of the year. I think this is a no-brainer. Am I wrong? It's Brandon Sanderson and Colleen Hoover, of course.
Agree.
Colleen's huge superstar, but Brandon, after that Kickstarter stunt, may well be the highest earning author like ever
Nerds.
in a single year. Who knows? Wait, did you like his books?
I do. That was me celebrating nerds.
That was a compliment. Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't like nerds.
Okay, biggest tech development. I'm gonna have to vote for artificial intelligence, and particularly that Chat GPT thing that people are talking about all over the internet. Can you tell Chat GPT from a fifth grader's school essay and people can't? That sort of thing. That's bound to impact audiobooks, and even, gosh, how long till it can write my first drafts? Because that takes so long.
No, I can tell you, it can't
No.
write podcast show notes. I can tell you that because I've tried.
You
So-
did it.
Yeah.
You have,
That's surprising.
you'd have to write. Here's the thing: you have to give it so much detail. You end up writing the thing anyway.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's but if you can ask it a standard like school question, like explain the Civil War to me. I guess actually don't ask that because who knows what it's going to tell you. But like when was World War II? It'll give you that answer, right, and give you a paragraph or two about World War II. But it can't, without context, answer things I feel like we have to do on a daily basis. So.
See, that's why I said, could it write my first draft? Because I know it's never going to write my last one, but the first draft always gets totally rewritten anyway. It's just long and time consuming to generate.
Bill, this should terrify you. What are you doing? This is AI scares me to death. We need to
It's a Dr. Faustus situation.
So we're recording this on January 5th. There's a tweet going around from yesterday that's pointing out the fact that why aren't we spending time making AI help us with like the mundane tasks we have to do every day and not like creating pieces of art that people normally get paid for. Like, let's use AI to make our lives easier, not like take away creative avenues we all need. So
Yes.
I agree.
Like that.
I heart that tweet. If the heart still exists on Twitter, who knows what's happening on that dumpster fire. So.
All right, next category, biggest event of the year, pertaining to publishing, of course. I got to think that's Penguin Random House's, surprising me, ultimately unsuccessful attempt to acquire Simon & Schuster. Although, as we record this, the strike is still going on at HarperCollins, so I bet the people who've been out for 40 days probably feel differently about what the biggest story of the year is. What do you guys think?
I guess. I don't know. This, this is not the area.
Rene. Rene.
Businessy.
The Rene has all RSS feeds about literary news, and she checks them every day.
I need AI to do this for me.
Listen, all right, listeners, go to ChatGPT and ask it what the biggest literary news of 2022 was, and put that in the YouTube comments, and we will check in on that later.
Read that.
Great.
Okay, put this into context. So, Draft to Digital, by far the biggest aggregator, distributor, whatever you want to call it, of ebooks, acquired Smashwords, which used to be the be-all, and then until Draft to Digital took over. So that merger in essentially the self-publishing world, that was allowed to continue, but Random House couldn't merge with Simon & Schuster. Granted, they're all worth a whole lot more money, but they do different things too. Publishing houses aren't just distributors, but I don't know. Is that who's going up and who's going down? Or
I think one helps the field it controls versus the other merger, which was not going to help, which was going to take away the opportunities for authors to get published by merging two companies that have two separate budgets and have to compete against each other. Turning that into one entity makes it less competitive. While like the self-publishing field, I think, is still growing. And so in those cases, companies can merge because that gives the people using those tools more options versus like if if we get to a day where self-publishing is as big as regular publishing, and there are $2 billion self-publishing companies that merge, then that should be shut down, right? But now it's still in sort of the growing up phase, I would say. Like, I view them differently. I can't explain why, but one is good and one is bad. I mean, one is good that it didn't happen, I should say, but would have been bad. There, is that clear enough? ChatGPT, help me out here.
Clear.
Yep, I
AI, help
agree.
me.
And last category, biggest winner of the year, I vote TikTok. But
yeah,
here's my theory. In the previous year, in 2021, TikTok generated books sales really for the first time that anybody had noticed, but on an unprecedented level. And this past year was the same thing, except even more so. BookTok author sales grew 6 times faster than the rest of the adult fiction market in the first half of 2022. And BookTok sales climbed more than 50% over the same time last year. It appears that younger generations trust BookTok community recommendations even more than, say, a celebrity recommendation. That didn't exist before, not really anywhere in social media to that extent. That's pretty huge. Is this the game changer?
Well, maybe
Jesse?
they figured out the bestseller list isn't quite accurate. So they're going with social media, which they believe is more accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if TikTok will be legal by the end of 2023. So I don't want to say that 2023 is the year of TikTok yet, since at least in the state of Oklahoma, and now if you, I think in certain branches of the federal government, can't have it on your phones. So we'll see. We'll see how TikTok handles that. Here's the thing. A clone of TikTok could be made by a multitude of other companies. So there might be something very similar that appears, which will then slowly just, make TikTok another version of a social media we all feel like we have to post on. So it is amazing how effective it is. I mean, it is the most effective time suck. It has turned Facebook into a version of TikTok that I end up watching now. Like, there are YouTube shorts that are also on YouTube and Facebook now. So everyone is doing that sort of short video format. So
yeah.
Again, I don't know how you talk about books in that format, but people seem to be doing it very well.
Evidently, I can remember a time when everybody was making like book trailers, short videos that you could post around, but really like a movie trailer for about a book. And that was, the thing for a while. If you're
you have one for one of your books, don't you?
Oh, more than one. But the point of where this is going is, I don't think that sells books very well. Movie it needs to be something different. They've experimented with television commercials to sell books too, and it doesn't seem to work well. Doesn't sell enough to pay the bills.
It needs to be somebody else making the video about your book, because then it's word of mouth. Then it's like, read this book, and they need to be like 24, and it's like a cool video, and then everybody shares it, and that's how it goes. 100,000 likes.
That's how social media has always been. It's always better when someone who isn't attached to something recommends it and shares it on their own, as like, this is something I enjoy. I mean, that's how podcasts grow. Is like, it's all word of mouth. You can spend a lot of money on Facebook ads, but you end up just annoying one old lady who sees the ad like 20 times, as I learned. So
he's talking about me. I'm the old lady.
You're the
Renee's like, I'm tired of hearing about your podcast on the Facebook feed. So.
All right. Well, maybe it's time to move along to the interview. Barry Friedman. So he's got a lot of fans because his work is not only funny, but also insightful, and also because he's just flat out a terrific writer, as he has shown many times in a beautifully wrought memoir, 4 Days and a Year Later, currently hovering over my shoulder. And his account of life on the road, The Joke Was on Me. He's got a new book just coming out, a collection of anecdotes about his late father. Jesse, cue up the music. Let's get crack-a-lackin'. Barry, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be here. And that was quite a graphic. The 3, 2. That was very impressive. We've had that before. That's good.
Well, we're coming along in the world, and you got to have the bonuses for the YouTube people.
Right.
You know how at the beginning of Saturday Night Live, they brag about people, or people will brag about how many times they've been the co-host. I think you may be reaching that status as interview superstar on the WriterCon podcast. You may have
Really?
the record. I can't think who
that's
would
cool.
else, because
Do we have to get him the jacket?
here, and we've
Usually
got
the five timers on SNL wear a jacket. They have
Or-
a special jacket in room.
You have somebody-
maybe
you have somebody
a
who writes
t-shirt.
a hat. You have somebody who writes a book like every week, though, right? What's his name? Got like 6,000 books out.
What are we talking about?
No, the guy. You have a guy who you publish who writes like a book a week. I assume he's been on the show a little bit more than I have.
Not
James
for
Patterson?
Not James Patterson, yes.
Yes, I do publish, but it's a little known thing.
Yeah, well, you're so modest about it too.
Well, I don't like to brag. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
All right.
I want a hat. I want a T-shirt. Jesse, you're right. I think I need something.
Somebody out there may be wondering, really, this Friedman guy lives in Oklahoma? This is inexplicable. How did this happen, Barry?
Well, I met my future ex-wife here. Came down
And decided to buy her a house?
Yeah, right. No, that's your line. No, no. I came down here and to finish college because I'm from New York. I say obviously. Came down to Oklahoma, finished college, and then I was going to graduate school in Florida, and subsequently got thrown out of the graduate school. But before I did that, I got married to a girl I met here. We went down to Florida, went to New York, and then came back to Oklahoma, left, came back, left, came back, left one more time and came back. So I'm now here for good. But yes, I'm from New York and came down here because I wanted to finish college and get out of New York. Like most New Yorkers, they want to get out at some point.
You have also worked as an actor, right? I know that you were in our mutual friend John Woolley's movie, Dan Turner, right? Weren't you in Dan Turner and others? And you've done commercials. I'm particularly fond of the one where you're lying on your back and barking at a pizza. Am I remembering this correctly?
That's perfect. That's exactly what I was doing. Ken's Pizza back then had introduced an 18-inch or 20-inch pizza, and the director thought it'll be fun if we just sort of make the fact that it was such a big pizza known to people. And he thought it'd be great to be lying on my back, look at the pizza, and as I was looking at how big it was, I actually said, "Wow, that's big," and started barking. And the director thought it was a great idea that I would bark at the pizza. The client did not like the fact that I was barking at the pizza, but the director loved the idea. But great memory.
Did this suggest that the pizza is dog food, or what?
No,
what is that you're saying?
Yeah, the client did take it the wrong way. I just meant that it was so big, it was frightening how big it was. it was a frightening pie.
Beware frightening pizzas.
Yeah,
writers.
Now you forgot my one big claim to fame. The thing I'm known for here, and I was in UHF.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask if that's how you got your
Rene
UHF role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I played Fletcher Crony 2. There was a Fletcher Crony 1, but I was Fletcher Crony 2. I am the Fletcher Crony 2 from which all other Fletcher Cronies now try to aspire.
Listen, young teenage Jesse bragged to his friends about Barry being in UHF. So that is his claim to fame in my life.
And every time it plays in a Lithuanian drive-in, I get a check. So go ahead and laugh if you want.
It's nice to have something that pays the bills and something you can rely on in your.
Sorry, pays the bills. Yeah, I think the last check was $3.38.
Well, buys you a big pizza.
Yeah, one slice of the big pizza.
One slice of a big pizza.
And Ken's went out of business. I'm not responsible. I don't know.
All right. More Barry history. How did you come to be known as Friedman of the Plains?
Well, my friend Charlie Pierce at Esquire, I had been contributing to his Thursday column. His Thursday column is Laboratories of Democracy, stolen from Justice Brandeis. And what Charlie does is every Thursday, he goes to different parts of the country for the weirdest stories of the week. And I started sending him things from Oklahoma, which now is the constant. Every column ends with Charlie saying, and we conclude, as is our custom, in the great state of Oklahoma, where, and he gives me a title like Dirt Inspector Friedman of the Plains. And that's where Friedman of the Plains came from, and FOTP came from that. And it's all Charlie Pierce, Esquire, who gave me that one.
Pretty good story, though, and I, that's all over the internet. People who are following you or following your Substack. That's, like the Bard of Avon and
Friedman of the
Friedman
Plains.
of the Plains.
That's
It's
right.
the same concept.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, we should talk about this new book that you have put together and is just coming out. This book with the title, which I cannot say on the podcast.
I was going to ask you, we can't say. It's Jack, SH asterisk, another letter.
By the way, we can say it and I can bleep it if that helps, or I can just show.
I think we should do that. Yeah, let's just keep saying it and have them keep bleeping it.
I just don't want to have to check the box that says that this video is not suitable for some audiences.
Oh, by the way, I clicked that anyway because we don't want people who are looking for videos for their kids to find us anyway. I don't think children will find this podcast interesting.
No, we could turn this into like 90 Day Fiancé, right? Every other word is bleeped. This will be perfect. Are you ready, Jesse? 3, 2, 1. The book is called Jack Beat. Now we can talk again. No one will know what that was.
Which is basically a collection of humorous incidents and observations about your late father, who was named Jack. So it's stuff.
It's stuff.
related.
What happened after my mother died in 1999? And there's always been a discussion in my family that I was the son who didn't really work. My father never considered what I do. Didn't know how I made a living. Right. In fact, one of his refrains for years was always, "How do you live?" He was an accountant. He couldn't quite figure out how it is I made a living, because I was a comedian for a number of years. And Bill, you know how many millions you can make in writing, but how many millions you can't make. And some of those years I didn't make the millions.
Yeah.
So I got to spend a lot of time with him. First in New Jersey, then Las Vegas, then when I moved him here to Tulsa. And what hit me while I was doing this with him was that some of the stories were just hilarious from him. And I started writing them down and just posting them on Facebook going, here's what happened to my father today. Well, the more I did that, I was surprised and heartened that people were following along. And they would ask questions that my father would ask, like he had an old friend, a cousin, Bernie Newman. And he would tell me that Bernie died. And Bernie was 98, so Bernie should have died. As soon as my father would tell me that, within 5 or 10 minutes, he would say something about Bernie, and I would say, well, he died. And he'd say, who told you that? I go, you did. He goes, well, that's what I heard. And so for years, the question was, did Bernie die? And so people would just write in and wonder where Bernie was and ask about Bernie. And then my father had this habit of, and I'm not exaggerating, Jesse, you know this, probably in the last 2 years of his life, went through about, I'm not exaggerating, 13 electric razors. He kept breaking electric razors. And every time I'd go over there, he'd have it taken apart. And of course, he couldn't put it back together. And I tell him, stop taking them apart. He goes, I didn't take it apart. Well, yeah, you did. He goes, I just tried to clean it. Well, that's taking it apart. And every time something like that would happen, or his way with women, which was just astonishing what he would get away with at 92, 93, 94. It's like he knew that he was allowed to say whatever he wanted and said whatever he wanted. And the more I put these stories together, the more I thought, there may be something to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, in putting the first volume together, was that from from 2004, when I started writing this seriously, to now, I could actually see the decay in him. So you could see the Alzheimer's and the dementia sort of creep up on him, where like he would be able to carry on a conversation. And towards the end, I knew if the phone rang after 6, 7 o'clock at night, that sundowner's disease would hit, and he'd be all over the map. One time he had some intestinal blockage, and the doctor called me and said, your dad's in really good shape for 92. He said, but you start talking to him, and the next thing I know, he was talking about foxholes and women. And I thought, how did I get here? And that's what it was with my father. You never quite knew how you got to the conversation you were in, but then when you were in it, it was hilarious, which is probably much more than you wanted, but that's how the book came about.
That's, what most struck me reading this is that, of course, you are and have been for decades a professional stand-up comic. And here's a book that has a lot of humorous anecdotes in it, but in most cases, your dad gets the punchline, not you.
Yeah. It was really important to me not to humiliate him and not to just use him for the joke. And I'm glad you point that out, because after a while, when I thought about how this would be accepted by people, he had to have the last word. And invariably what would happen is he would say something so completely insane, but then you'd think about it and wonder, well, he's not entirely wrong. For instance, he used to wear the worst toupees imaginable. I mean, they just could not get any worse. And one of the reasons they were worse is he bought women's hair pieces that came in a box, and they'd have names like Celeste or Barbara. And he put them on his head, and he cut them himself in a mirror. I mean, and what could go wrong with that? And one time I said to him, we were in Las Vegas, I said, Dad, you really have to stop buying hair that comes in a box. And he said, what do you want me to do? That's the way they come. Well, he's not entirely wrong. Right? That is the way they come. So his world was one of those, I use this word a lot, but it really was, there was a verisimilitude to the way he looked at the world. Not entirely wrong, but completely sort of off the point, off the subject.
So is that how you got the idea for bundling all these stories, to just kind of paint the full picture of it, or?
That's a good question. Looking at, years and years of this, I didn't quite know how it would read in a book. I mean, from Facebook or Substack, you read it a couple of days later, you read another one, and there's a flow to that. But in an actual book, I wasn't sure how that was going to go day after day or week after week. And that's when I thought I'm going to have some narrative that kind of glues it all together. But I did think that if I was going to put these together, I did have to figure out some through line. And what hit me was that through line was going to be the obvious, not the obvious, but just the dementia that was going to happen, that was happening. And I thought, well, that can't be the story, but clearly it's there. And as you know, Bill, some of these things were not, so especially towards the end, they were not particularly hilarious, although I always tried to find something about the moment that was more than just my father's dying. Look how sad I am. Look what a wonderful life he had. I mean, the day before he died, we were watching a football game. And he doesn't really like football, but we're watching the NFL. And he's watching Chicago and Dallas. And somehow he decided that Chicago was his favorite team. And he starts screaming at the play calling that the coach from Chicago is making. And finally, at some point, now really, he's 24 hours before his death, and he says, "This is horrendous." He goes, "Can I sue?" And I thought, how many Chicago Bears fans in their life wanted to sue the team? And he actually decided to sue that. And maybe the last conversation I had with him, and I wrote about this maybe in volume 3, was he was aspirating, so he couldn't drink and couldn't eat. Which is sad, because you sort of starve to death, choke to death, pick one. And I said to him at some point when he kept saying, "Please get me some water, please get me some water, please get me some water." And I said, "I can't get you water, Dad, because you'll choke. I cannot get you water." And by that point, he was half out of it, didn't quite know what that meant. He was getting angry. I said, "Look, I'll ask the nurse if she'll bring you some water. And he just stopped. He said, the nurse, she's not going to bring anything. She's a Republican. Just out of nowhere. So he kept something in him, some sense of Jack Friedman, almost to the end.
Wonderful.
Barry's forgetting the other part of that Chicago's Bears game where Jack believed that he had made some bet against me and wanted to make sure I got paid, but he didn't have his wallet. And so
That's right.
forced Barry to take out his credit card and hand it to me to prove that he had paid me for whatever the bet was. We still, to this day, do not know what the bet actually was about, but I got paid. So
Jesse and his sister and their father was in the room. The hospital room got very crowded towards the end there. Yeah.
You have mentioned to me, what you just mentioned a second, lack of understanding about how you made a living. But look at you. This is your sixth book, I think?
Sixth book, yeah.
What'd your dad think about all this writing, or you being a writer?
Well, first of all, he never read one of the books. He used to say, are you still writing for the paper? I never wrote for the paper.
Because that's respectable.
Yeah, I never wrote for the newspaper. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it wasn't really respectable when I was doing comedy either, except when he'd meet me at casinos like in Vegas or Reno or Atlantic City. I used to get him buffet comps. And then I was the son who got him into shows and got him buffet comps. He didn't quite ever, as my mother would have said, put the two together and said, well, my son's a writer. Even when I'd see him for dinner at the retirement center, which he called the Hebrew home, which was lovely. He said, people would come up and say, Barry, I read your article or I heard your essay or a wonderful piece about your father. And he'd say, what are they talking about? I go, well, I showed you the piece. Did you read it? Oh yeah, I read it 1,000,000 times. Well, he didn't read it. He was just not that kind of hands-on parent who was very proud of the fact that I did this. Although there were other times where he knew that because I did this, I got to spend the most time with him compared to my brother and sister. And one time he called me and said, I put him on speaker because I knew something was wrong with his voice because he was very serious. He goes, Barry, what you do for me, nobody else could do. I don't know what I would do. I'd be dead without you. He goes, your brother and sister, I know they love me, but you know, your brother works and your sister's sophisticated. What? What am I? Yeah. So he didn't quite, to answer your question, Bill, didn't quite understand the writing. Because in those days, when he was growing up, I guess a parent judged his son or daughter's success by how much money they made. And one time we were watching reruns of Seinfeld, and he just starts screaming about comedy. He goes, it's a terrible life, and you can't make any money, and there's no future. And I said, Dad, how much money do I have to make for you to think that I'm a success? He said, 155,000. I go, you have a figure? It's a rhetorical question. But the only thing I could think of was he probably had at that point 150,000 in the bank. And if I had 155, I'd be more successful than he. And so that's why he came up with the figure.
Wow.
That his mind he actually gave me one of the first jokes I ever wrote on stage. My parents were married for 35 years. They split up for a year and a half, and then they got back together. And I said to him at one point, I said, Dad, how long were you and Mom married? He goes, gross or net? Which is a great joke for an accountant, right? So his mind, he was a numbers guy. And I was not in the field with numbers. It's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, so this is shifting topic a little bit, but since we're talking to writers, how did COVID affect your writing career? For better, for worse? How did you function around it?
Better. I wrote Jacob Fishman's Marriages during COVID, and Bill was good enough to decide to put out Road Comic again, the first book I wrote, and decided to go through it and make some changes, and wound up changing the entire book. About 7 lines left from that book to what eventually became The Joke Was on Me. So I could do COVID again. I mean, productivity-wise, it was great for me. Yeah.
And the book's much better now, right?
Oh, it's much better. Yeah, yeah. In fact, you never told me how bad the first one was. I wanted to call it Road Comic: The Apology, but you said no.
I still ride for that title.
You'd need a legal policy and stuff. All right. This has been fun as always. So what are you, I think I know the answer, but whatever. What are you working on now?
Well, I'm actually working on volume 2.
Yeah, I thought that might be
Jack.
Yeah.
Ready, Jesse? Jack. Volume 2. Also working
You're trying
on the
to
blog.
increase his fee by giving him more to do in the post-production, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, trying to do that. I've got the political stuff on Substack. I still write for geology magazines, a geology magazine. I don't know anything about oil and gas, but it does pay the bills. And what else am I doing? Still doing some comedy, actually. May go to the Bahamas again in April or so. So
cool.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Beats working for a living. I just turned 65, so I can't go to work now anyway. I'm done. No one's gonna hire me. Yeah, we're like,
it's over.
Yeah, been off the train. Been off the train for 40 years. It's tough to get a job in finance.
Oh, you were definitely hireable last year for sure. So.
Well, last year?
Yeah, when you were 64.
Yeah, 64. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, Barry. Thanks again. Thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Good seeing you, Rene.
Good to see you.
Thank you again, Barry Friedman. Always the best and most fun interview for this podcast. Hey, if you are enjoying this podcast, like me, not that I'm completely impartial, but if you are, please subscribe and then rate or review it wherever you get podcasts. It not only makes us look good, it helps new readers discover us. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned this lately, you can find the video version of these podcasts on YouTube on the Writer Con channel. There'll be links to all this stuff in the show notes. And for more information about Rene, you can find her at renegutteridge.com on social media and as a senior contributor at Writing Momentum. All right, writers. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.